defining the role of tertiary educators in Nigeria. And this webinar, we are narrowing down on the role of educators in strengthening pedagogy in the early years of a child. So please tell us your name, your organization, and where you're joining in from. What do you hope to learn to contribute to the conversation today? And yes, so my job this afternoon is to briefly introduce the NICE community. NICE stands for National Innovation Collaborative for Education. NICE is a community of education innovators, and we're committed to increasing access to quality education for all children, and it's curated by TEP Center. NICE currently engages the following channels, including monthly newsletter, podcast, Education Unscripted, virtual and in-person meetup, the innovation webinar series like today's event. This webinar series has explored themes highlighted in previous edition of NEDIS. To collaborate with us on this webinars, please send an email to nice@tepcenter.com. We also have our Ed Meets. It's a bridge builder. It's a bridge builder event designed to provide a platform for education and other sector experts to collaborate and synergize for the purpose of solving complex problems and strengthening access to quality education using this platform. Previous editions include EdMeet Tech, EdMeet Foundational Learning. In the near future, EdMeet would be focused on finance. The NICE community is an outcome of the annual Education Innovation Summit. NEDIS organized and hosted by the Education Partnership Center. It was established in 2016. NICE is a budding community designed to facilitate continuous learning and collaboration. The 7th edition of NEDIS was held in October 2022, and it was themed Reimagining Education Development in Africa, Bridging the Skills Gap. The summit focused on how to recalibrate education, innovation, and development to ensure all children and young people are fully equipped to thrive in life and contribute meaningfully to society. Recent events from the pandemic to insecurity to flooding have shown that not all children have the opportunity to pass through the traditional classroom. So how do we ensure these children are not forgotten, but still gain access to quality education? So that's why the 8th edition of our NEDIS Education Innovation Summit will focus on sustainability and education innovation. So please join our mailing list to stay updated on this event. So today's conversation will allow us to dig into the conversation on the role of pedagogy in early childhood education. So please stay tuned, and we look forward to an engaging conversation. With no further much ado, I'm just going to introduce our moderator, who is no other person than Ezioma Akabike. She's the Programs Officer at TEP Center. She's going to be moderating the panel discussion and also launching us directly to the panel's discussion. Welcome, Zima. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mutu. Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. I would also like to welcome our guest speakers, who I'll be introducing in just a bit. And of course, another one welcome to our friends, our colleagues, and like minds that are joining us from all over the globe. I'm pleased to be moderating this session, and most certainly looking forward to a rich discussion that would soon follow. Before we dive deep into the conversation, as Mutumaria has pointed out, I wanted to remind us of the topic for today, which is exploring the role of pedagogy in early childhood education. And we'll be breaking this down by taking a look at the critical role of teachers in developing learners' foundational literacy and numeracy skills. We'll be talking through the most effective teaching strategies in early childhood education, and we'll look at the possible improvements to FLN outcomes through continuous and relevant teachers' capacity development. With no further ado, I would like to welcome our speakers. First on the line, in no particular order. First on the line is Mrs. Oluwatumininu Lawansin. Mrs. Lawansin is a certified Montessori directress of young learners under 0 to 6 years and is currently training to become a 6 to 12 years Montessori elementary certified guide at the Southwest Institute of Montessori Studies in Arizona, United States. She's also undergoing a postgraduate education international training course at Nottingham University. She has a TCI certification in forest education from Cushing, Texas in the US. Mrs. Lowenstein has a BSc degree in zoology from Ogun State University. She started her career with a leading insurance company in Nigeria, the Custodian and Allied Insurance. She decided to pursue her passion and dream working with children and served at the Children's Church Department at Kingsway International Christian Center as the coordinator. She then took up a teaching job at Green Spring School, Anthony, Lagos, and taught different age groups in preschool, nursery, lower primary, and upper primary. She's also serving in the Children's Church at her present place of worship. Very warm welcome, Mrs. Lowenstein. Our next speaker, who is Dr. Chinedu Oluwadamilola. She has over 30 years rich experience in classroom teaching, teaching supervision, teacher development, school administration, and leadership, cutting across preschool, primary, secondary, and tertiary education levels. Her areas of interest include teacher development, supervision, and evaluation with a view to improve student learning, classroom management, instructional, and personal effectiveness. She's also an author, a facilitator, and a teacher trainer. Dr. Oluwadamilola started out with a BSc in applied microbiology before changing to the education field in 1993 and going on to equip herself sufficiently in that area by capping it up with a PhD in educational management. You're most welcome, Dr. Chinedu. And our third speaker, Mr. Odinakachukwu Nwosu, is a dedicated project management professional with a background in engineering and education. He's the program coordinator for Unveiling Africa and an alumnus of Teach for Nigeria. His journey in the field of education is marked by his unwavering commitment and outstanding contributions. During his impactful fellowship at Teach for Nigeria, he took on the role of educating Basic 2 learners, leaving a lasting impression on the pupils he mentored. His fervor for education and innovation is further exemplified by his recognition as an award-winning innovator at Teach for Nigeria Innovation Hub, owing to his pioneering work with his EdTech initiative, Virtual Excursions, and this has harnessed the power of technology to transform learning experience for countless of students. Mr. Nwosu's relentless pursuit of quality education extends to his leadership role in Unveiling Africa, where he now leads the Unveiling Africa Transformers Club, demonstrating his commitment to pushing the boundaries of educational excellence. It is a huge honor to have these distinguished professionals here with us today to share their thoughts and their expertise. Welcome once again to all three of our speakers. Okay, so going into it, I want to start us off by saying that pedagogy is simply the practice and approaches used to build up and equip learners with the right competency skills to progress in their academics and their character. We know that children spend a significant amount of time of their first years in early childhood education and care. And it is at this point that they start to build the foundation of their learning capacity. And all children have the right to a solid early childhood education that gives them a good start in life. Therefore, effective pedagogy in education at early years is critical to preparing them for a successful lifelong learning and sustainable development. Now, this is where teachers come in to play a very important role, because in early childhood education, teachers are seen as the agents of change who have taken up the responsibility for their profession by using their proven experiences and teaching methods that are tailored to the needs of their learners. Now, turning to our first speaker, Mrs. Lowenstein, can you share with us your thoughts on the role of caregivers in early childhood pedagogy? What does the science of teaching and learning also tell us are the most effective in enhancing assimilation for children in their early years? And how can quality pedagogy influence the speedy development of foundational literacy and numeracy skills? Mrs. Lowenstein.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Roma. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am, you're correct.
Thank you. Well, to start with the first question, good afternoon, everyone. To start with the first question, thank you for explaining what pedagogy is, because we'll have to, as teachers, as we don't have to be so complicated. And so it's just the methodology, that we use to teach children. Can I just say, I'm not a professional here, but you see, by virtue of the fact that I've had to be in the classroom for over 30 years, I'm going to be talking from my experience. So if we look at childhood, I want us to also understand that childhood is from 0 to 12. It's not just the 0 to 6 that we're talking about. So when we talk about a caregiver, it's someone that is caring, someone that knows what he or she is doing. And so how do we as caregiver attend to these children? So we must understand first. Okay, let me just start with the first question. And the first question is, what does let me just get the first question again so that I follow it the way it has been sent to me. Okay, so the first one is the role. What is our role as caregivers? Okay, being a caregiver, like I said, you have to care, and then you have to also give service. It doesn't start from the level of a teacher. It starts from the very first moment when a mother is being told by a medical doctor that there's an amazing features growing in that one. And so the care starts from that day, until the delivery of the child. And then from there, the first day that the child comes to being, how the child is attended to, the environment the child is exposed to, until particular time, maybe in this generation where we have a lot of people bring in their children out at age 3 months. But in the past, it used to be like around 1-2 years. Okay, so let's look at what is peculiar with us right now when you bring a 0 to 3, a 3-month-old baby into the crèche. So the role of a caregiver is first to understand the milestone to understand what is relevant with the developmental milestone of that child. So the role is to care, to make the environment conducive for the baby, to know what is expected, even to as little as the mobile that will be there, to as little as, the lighting in the environment, to as little as understanding the way the child eats and, the way the child exposes himself to whatever it is within that 3 months that the child is leaving the home. So that's the role of the caregiver. It starts from the mother, and then he's spun into the school, depending on the age the child comes. So our role is to care. Our role is to have an understanding of what is needed at that particular point in time with the child. Okay, so that's the role of a caregiver. And so when you're doing the caregiving, you must understand the child, you must understand the plane of development, you must understand, what is necessary. Because if we look at the first age, that's the first 0 to 3 years, is absorbent mind. But you see, what kind of absorbent mind is it? Is an unconscious absorbent mind. So as a caregiver, I must understand that whatever I do in the environment goes along to impact in the learning of the child. Okay, so going to the second one, what that says the science of teaching and learning, tell you how the most effective enhancing assimilation. You see, I need to understand, we're still going back to the same thing, I need to understand what it is. But at this age, for a child to assimilate, it has to be play. Like Maria Montessori says, she mentioned that play is actually the work of a child. And then Albert said something that the highest form of research is play. So the children at that age, if we're looking at 0 to 3 and we're looking at 3 to 6, it has to come in form of play-way method. I introduce, I tell the child, I go, informing the child about what I need to inform the child and give the information to the child. I use the right language because I understand that once this phase is over, the child is going to use an adult language. So I am conscious about using the adult language, So how do I do it? It has to come from play. From the moment I'm changing the child, I'm playing, talking about what I am doing. The moment the child wants to eat, I'm talking about the spoon. So I'm talking about everything. It's a form of play. And when the child is ready to move, I'm helping the child to do the movement, with play, and then exposing the child to everything that comes along the way. The hopping, the jumping, that people feel it is not necessary, actually helps in the connection with the movement, the refinement of the movement and the brain. So our role is to make sure that these children are exposed to this learning in no dogmatic way, in a playway method that you see they can also relate with. So so that is how the children assimilate, play with, because that is their own work. That's why you see a child that would hold the material and play with it consistently, repeat it over and over, and then to an adult is not making sense. The child is discovering something there. So the adult that will attend to that set of children, depending on their age, must understand this first. So let's go to the third question. How can we call the pedagogy influence speedy development of foundational literacy and numeracy? In early childhood, we have 0, like I said, 0 to 6, we have 0 to 3, the unconscious absorbing mind and the conscious absorbing mind. And then we move to the age of imagination, that's the 6 to 12, where everything that will lay the foundation for the 0 to 3 and then the 3 to 6 would also play a large role, in what the child must have absorbed, and then how the child would, both at the point of reconstructing and then using the imagination. So how do we do this? We must know first what is expected of that 0 to 6. What are the sensitive period that these children show or reveal at that milestone age? And so as a caregiver, we must know and understand this, because we should understand that, okay, he's unconscious, but at every point in time, there's something called human tendencies. It is revealing in every life, for order, for language, for cognitive, sensory. And so what do? We, after understanding that, what do? We begin to build that foundation for the child. So for the 0 to 3 months baby, like I said, we don't just go mute. That's why as a caregiver, you must stop. Because if language is developed at this age, by 4 months, the baby starts blabbing. If language is developed, by the time they are about 2 years, it will have an impact. And that's why you'll find out that some children, they say that they have delayed language. So what do we do at this time? Language-rich environment. We talk about everything and everything that the child needs to understand. We're jumping, we're singing the rhymes, we're singing the poems, we're attending to the children. So by that, we would influence the speech. But if the environment is quiet, we are killing that child. Sensitive period, once the window of that opportunity closes, it's not that the child would not learn, but the truth is that the child will struggle through, the learning. So how do we develop this? Through the playway method. And we know that children love manipulating. We're not going to be exposed to abstract later, because life is we're moving from that concrete to abstract. So what do? We create an environment for them, language-rich environment. We use all the things in that. We mention it to them. We name it. We number it. We sing the rhymes and the poem. We make sure that all that is rich for them. So by the time they're ready to construct themselves from the 3 to 6, they have a whole lot to pick from. But once the environment is devoid of the numeracy of the numeracy, or even the culture, is going to affect the next plane of development. And that's why, as a caregiver, I must know what it is that's obtainable for the developmental milestone of the 0 to 6, the 6 to 12. Why? Because I would understand how, when I understand what the milestone or the plane of development is saying for that age, because I know, I'll be able to groom the child to that age group that is going to transit at the end of the day when the child is not with me. So going to the fourth question, so that what are the selective process to acquire highly educated and competent teachers to teach children in school? Well, from my profile, I'm a Montessori trained person, and it's a bit of a challenge in this our world, because to be Montessori trained, you require a lot of money, and we understand not exposed to that capacity. So, for example, in my school, because I know that it is very tough to get Montessori trained directors. When they come in, the first thing I look out for is a person education inclined. Then I look at, apart from that, we also look at the passion, that we have in here. But you see, in our reality here, a lot of people are into teaching not because they're passionate about it. From my profile, you'll see that I left insurance for what I so much love, because I understand that the foundation is more important than any other thing in life. Once the foundation is settled, we are going to sleep and have grown children, that will make us proud. So a lot will leave the job, not because they're passionate about it, but because they want to have for a passionate person. You might not be trained, and then over the years you will now groom the teachers, but you have to look for passion first in the person, the will to want to attend to the child or to the children that you will be committed into your hand. So the process is actually not in this part of the world, with respect to all the schools and organizations. The process here is it depends on the reality that faces you. So for me, that's what I do. Look for your educational background, and if you don't have, I look for your passion, and then I train you for the skill. Okay, so but normally you have to be trained. If you're not trained, you cannot handle the child. So as the Montessori training, for example, you have the teaching of the guide, the training of the guide. There's quite a lot that they talk about the guide. The guide is actually the same thing as a teacher, because we're meant to guide the child to fulfill their potential. So basically, that's it. But the real, the real way to do it, or the proper way to do it, is to make sure that people are trained before they handle the children. Okay, I think I have, so that because of time, I think I've handled the questions that you've asked me, so that I can give other speakers the opportunity to speak. I'm here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing those with us, Mrs. Lavansin. I mean, it's wonderful that you've mentioned from the relevant needs for childcare, in terms of environment and the child's peculiar need for his or her development, especially for very young minds. That play is a very important method for learning, the type of language that they're exposed to, which they easily absorb, regardless of the level of consciousness. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because most people are not aware that the child might not be conscious of the things you're saying, but they have a certain subconscious side in their formative brain where they take things in. And as they get older, those are the kind of things that they begin to express themselves in, the things that they have absorbed. So it's very important for caregivers, to keep them engaged using rhyme, using the play methods, and of course, age-appropriate language, and also that it's very important for teachers who teach to have passion. I mean, apart from the educational background, training and passion, I also agree that it's very, very important while seeking out teachers, especially for children in their formative years. Okay, so moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Odinaka Chukwuwosu. I think based on your wholesome experience and your contributions in education technology, can you tell us how technology can transform learning experience for children in their early years? Also touch on how private partners can contribute or invest in improving access to quality FLN skills, and how private partners can contribute or invest in improving access to quality FLN skills.
Thank you so much, Ezioma. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much, and the audience. These questions you've asked me, they're kind of broad, and I'll just take them one after the other, okay? When you talk about technology and how technology can influence learning of children in their early age, it happens in a whole way. It's so broad. I can tell you that In my younger years, I was privileged to go to start with a public school. I started in primary one, but I was not too conversant with the classroom, and my parents took me to a private school. And to shock you, they moved me from primary one to nursery one. So as at that time, there wasn't much of the creche and the kindergarten. So that school was among the best in my area then. So I started from primary one, and I can remember after my primary three, a lot of development began to happen. I noticed that people in primary one then and then kindergarten or nursery, or people in nursery then started to use televisions in the class. But when I was in nursery, I didn't use television. There was no television in my class. So you see, this is just an instance to show you that technology has been so wonderful and it has really helped in a whole lot of ways. So one of the things technology brings, it brings interactive learning. So you do not need to have many teachers. With technology in the class, students are hearing, just like what Mrs. Lawansin had said. Children will be hearing a lot of things. They'll be hearing people speak the right terms, the right phonetics. They are learning these things without, maybe a very trained teacher that knows all those things, So that's one thing technology brings. It also makes it possible for people even in low-income communities or in communities where normally this kind of early learning may not be really feasible in a standard way. Technology brings it closer to them. So with technology, even families that are unable to send their children to schools that we have the standard and best of teachers, in that small school within their community, they can learn something. So with that, it brings accessibility. It brings, although you cannot compare it with when you have trained teachers, but it helps. So it brings accessibility to learning for young people. One of the good things technology brings, it brings audiovisual content. So it brings characters in a more relatable way to young people. So apart from the cartoons and pictures and images, young people, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they can relate well with, images, with videos. So it helps them learn things. So a child that is based in a community in River State, in a riverine community in River State, can be learning about things happening in Lagos. If he's watching a movie where they're talking about a school or a hospital, he could see standard schools, standard hospitals without even seeing one in real life. So that's what technology does. Technology brings these things, this kind of contents to them. We know now that one of the best ways many children have learned how to speak well is the use of technology, from that early childhood. They are able to, you see some children, you'll be so surprised, how you speak so well, you are, talking well, but, the kind of school you are going, of course, if you look at that school, you may not really have that, they may not really have the kind of teachers that may enable you to speak this kind of way, but technology has brought it. Children, even before starting school, they begin to watch some things on their parents' phone, maybe on YouTube, Coco Melon, this, that, and before you know, they begin to speak like those cartoons. So it helps their literacy skills, even numeracy as well, as little as possible. It helps, it helps a whole lot. So these are some of the things technology brings. And as she has said earlier, let me reemphasize it about language. Technology helps in language. So take, for instance, if you have a child here in Nigeria and you want that child to learn French, to take French as maybe second or third language, and you do not have, at that very early age, you may not want to employ a teacher, but you could use technological tools and devices that, where the characters there speak French. And before you know, your child is getting basics of French. He may not really know how to place them effectively, but you're already depositing seeds in that child's brain and subconsciousness that later on, with just one or two brushes with a qualified teacher, that child will be able to speak French, the child will be able to speak Mandarin. This is because of the influence of technology. Okay, so and then we have a lot of kind of contents in the technology, with usage of technology, have some contents, those contents, they can help the child to build some kind of soft skills that enable them to interact well with their fellow learners in the class and even with adults at that very early age. So some of those skills they may learn how to collaborate, how to give, how to share, just by watching, watching some stuff. So I'm not saying here that technology, removes the role of your teachers, but it has helped to advance, the quality of education, irrespective of the class, irrespective of location of that child, irrespective of so many factors. So technology has been really one of the helpers or enablers in this modern time for good education among learners in their early age. Moving forward, he asked me another question concerning how private partners can contribute. So private partners can contribute in various ways. We know that already. If you should by now know that early childhood education is not really managed by the local government, in Nigeria. The government manages some level or strata of education. So in most states, the local government handles primary education. Then the state government handles secondary, and the federal government and even state as well handle tertiary education. So now, if you look, you notice that most of the government or government on its own doesn't manage and handle early childhood education. Although in our policy for education, it is there that, this is a recognized system of a recognized level of education in Nigeria, but government involvement is very, very low. So it tells you already that more of the people who participate in this are private people, entrepreneurs, schools, other missionary organizations, and so on and so forth. So one of the better ways they can contribute, apart from how they're already contributing, is by teacher training, for instance. So we have a lot of knowledge gap in people who can really take care of very young children. So private partners must not necessarily own a Montessori school or a crèche or any of these early childhood education centers. But private partners can help, train the capacity of people, of teachers, or people who want to go into that form of education or that form of education provision. So they can begin to train them. That's one way they can do it, teacher training. Another way that they could really help is by giving it could give scholarship as well. Private partners can give scholarships to people who want to enroll in such kind of trainings. So if we have, take for instance, our education, colleges of education or education bodies wanting to teach or bring up maybe, let's say Corona Trust, Corona Education Center, and Teacher Training Center, for instance, if they want to teach, maybe let's say bring in 100 or 1,000 new early learning teachers into maybe Lagos State, if they have funding or scholarship from organizations that have the money, it makes it easy for people who are already into that field or who want to go into that field to enroll. Because if you want to go for such education, you need money. So if private partners can help by scholarships to teachers or people who want to go into that field. I know this thing, one of the things we are having now is that most of the people that join teaching are not like the best, let's say from entry, are not like the best minds, okay? So the best people want to do medicine, they want to do engineering, they want to do other things. So, but if we have people who are giving scholarships in this regard, we could have many very best minds or good minds join teaching, from the beginning. I'm not saying that we do not have quality teachers or people who are, good. My mom was a teacher. Until she retired, she was a teacher in a primary school, and that was what she wanted to do. That was what she studied. She had her master's in it, so she was good at it, and that was. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that currently in our world, in our level now, many people do not want to go into teaching because maybe because of the remuneration. So, but if via scholarship, private partners can encourage, this kind of learning, this kind of teaching, and this kind of involvement in this way by giving scholarships to people who want to go in that field. One of the things private partners can also do, it can also help in technology penetration. So there are many tools, many apps, many devices that are on board, maybe in the world or even in Nigeria. So one of the ways they could help is to ensure that, especially those ones that are subscriber-based, are able to reach some low-income communities or places that are educationally not advantaged as we have maybe in Southwest or Southeast. So in some places that are educationally disadvantaged, they could help with technology penetration. They could help in giving maybe devices or subscriptions to people who want to learn or who want to teach young people, very young people. That's one of the ways they can contribute. Aside that, there are other ways, and one of them is curriculum development. We already have standardized curriculum for learners of that very young age, because what they really need to learn is kind of almost the same all over the world, because they've not reached the stage where you begin to put the differences in the culture and environment in. But apart from that, we have our own peculiar environment in Africa and in Nigeria in particular. So one of the things we could do, private partners, private practitioners, they could help in curriculum development and try to enrich the curriculum for young people. So it must not be that very early age. Since early age that is defined here reaches 6 years, nowadays we have people in their 6 years, they're already in primary 3. And even we have many people that need to really bring in. We have many people who are very smart and who may want to even bring in some traces of things that are localized around us into the education system. So, like if there's a lot of discourse around bringing in African-centered perspectives to education. So one of those ways is by infusing this thing in a curriculum development. So take, for instance, we already know, yes, that when you say A, in the old way, they say this A is for apple, so, but we could see while they are learning, they can still learn it with something that is, closer to the environment. You can say A is for amala. It does not beat anybody. It's still correct, and the child can relate with it, provided it is well pronounced and it is well packaged. So that is one of the ways, we could build these students so that even from that childhood, when they begin to grow, they will not see foreign things as the superb things. They could see things that are, built in Nigeria or made in Nigeria as also good as well. So this is one of the ways. Apart from indigenization of the content, they could also enrich it. So that's why we have people who are doing research. We have Mrs. Lawanson here. From all the things she said, she's a researcher. So by all these things, all these indices she called out, all these metrics is based on research, and those researches will be, if the private partners can always come back and infuse the product of those researches into the curriculum to enrich it. Aside that, other ways that they could contribute include public awareness. This is a modern time. It's a modern time. If you go to low-income communities, you find out that even till today, many young people, many families do not enroll their children for early childhood education, in the normal sense, starting from the crèche to kindergarten, to nursery, and so on. They just enroll them from primary 1. Okay, and that child may miss the things that are available now in the world, the enablers that will make that child to perform so well in primary school. So you could have, if you go to low-income communities, you see young people, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, they can't spell 2-letter words. That's when they are learning it, While if a child has undergone, the normal system now we have in the very good schools, in the Coronas of this world, the Green Springs, they've gone through early childhood education. By primary one, they are reading newspaper, you know, so that's the difference. So if through awareness, maybe private partners can make awareness, tell people in different communities the importance, and no matter how little, they could bring in this kind of learning into some communities that are bereft of it, it will really go a long way. Aside that, one other way they can help is through research. You know, research now is not really done by government in education so much. It is more people who are learning, and people who are learning, people who are committed, and people who are even private. So that is one of the ways private practitioners can help contribute to early learning, early childhood education in Nigeria or even in the world. So that's by research and evaluation. So when you put in new methods in the class and teach them, and you see that, oh, this is very effective or this is not very effective, you go back, redefine it, and bring it in. So bringing it in comes back to curriculum development and so on. So that's how it is. So, and then finally, I think one of the ways is through teacher incentives. So incentives can come in form of awards for teachers who are in early childhood. You know, most of the teachers that received awards in this life are more of the teachers in secondary school. My teachers won an award in their time, but those in primary school did not win. So that's because the children in secondary school, sometimes they can even vote for their teachers to win this or win that. But, you know, if you cannot have private practitioners give incentives to early education teachers, it will really go a long way. It will really go a long way, you know, to promote that particular field and even encourage the teachers as well. So these are my thoughts around that. I don't know, Ezioma, do you want me to exhaust all these things you've asked me, or I should just pause and allow Dr. Chinedu to take over?
Okay, I think you should pause here. You've mentioned a lot. I do have one more question for you, but we'll circle back to you. So thank you very much. I do think that technology is definitely a powerful tool for early learning in terms of, you know, accessibility, especially when there's a gap of where teachers are available, the visual aspect of learning. And then you also highlighted the importance of training teachers, which is where private partners come in to support. There's also the opportunities to award scholarships to interested parties. And this also touches on Mrs. Lawanson's point, where she mentioned that something that is really critical in selecting teachers for early childhood learning is those that have the passion. And then we are appreciating your mention about enriching the curriculum to reflect our culture, you know, with more people supporting and executing research studies that will provide evidence on what is more familiar within our society and in what works best, especially for these early formative learning. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure the questions are already coming in the chat room, but we will give our next speaker a chance to share her thoughts, and then we'll go to the questions and answers. So Dr. Chinedu, listening to all that has been said so far, can you share your perspective on the areas that teachers need help in, especially the ones that traditional education courses and certificates don't cover? How often do you think teachers should undergo capacity development training just so that they can remain relevant in their delivery at school level? And how effective are teaching approaches in public and private schools? Are there any disparities? And if so, how can these disparities be resolved?
Thank you very much. Ezioma.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. And welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mrs. Lawanson, for setting the ball rolling. That was really detailed. One could feel a practitioner talking. So, and thank you, Mr. Mosu. Okay, I'll just take the questions that I have been given about how often teachers should undergo capacity development training so as to remain relevant. Now, there's no gainsaying the fact that professional development is very crucial continuous professional development. And the emphasis is on the continuity and not just a one-off thing, sometime at the beginning of a session or once in 2-3 years for use for the purpose of promotion, as is done in some places, but a continuous one. And the education field is not the only industry where professional development is key. It is done across various fields. So in terms of how often, there is no template to this. And I will try and qualify that. There's no template to how frequent it should be. But we could look at some guidelines that would help one to determine. But I had mentioned one of them. It shouldn't be once in a while. It shouldn't be once in 2 years or once in a session. So some of the things that we need to look at is, what is the need of the school, of the teachers? So school leaders, school administrators need to find out what, to carry out some sort of needs assessment regularly. And we will not go into details about how to do that, but just entering the classroom and seeing what happens within the classroom goes a long way to help in terms of determining what the needs of the teachers are. And so with the needs assessment, that determines what areas that teachers need to be trained or retrained. And so that's one. And, the schools also should have policies regarding these things, policies regarding how often continuous development, capacity development should take place, how often that should happen, how often. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I hope my video is showing because I didn't turn it off. All right, so another thing is within the education space, and like everything in this that we see in the world, changes are so frequent. What was trending or what was relevant 10 years ago, 5 years ago, research, development, new changes has made it not as relevant anymore. So the frequency of changes, new initiatives, and all sorts of things makes it necessary, mandatory, that teachers need to be trained as frequently as possible. I mean, I'm going to have to mention this here, but I would, circle back to it. 5 years ago, how much of mental health was anybody talking about? 10 years ago, how much of special education needs were we referring to? So these are not things we sweep under the carpet and say they are not necessary, but there are things that are emerging. Some of them have been there, but more information coming concerning them. So it is necessary that teachers need to be trained, educators need to be trained to remain relevant. And of course, in terms of experience, I particularly like what Mrs. Lawansin said. Some people come in and they do not have the qualifications, the academic qualifications, but they do have the passion. And some people have the qualifications, they may not even have the passion, but they are in the field. So they need to be trained. And training, from my experience, training for teachers to remain relevant, it's not just about what happens in the classroom. It's not just about the cognitive or pedagogy. It's not just about that. It's also about how to be within an education environment, what to do, how to relate, even how to grow the passion is important. So it's all part of, the needs assessment, the experience, the individual goals, and so on. So it's important. And feedback and evaluation helps as well. You get a feedback from the stakeholders. The learners in the classroom are part of the stakeholders. The parents are part of the stakeholders. The teachers themselves are part of the stakeholders. So school administrators need to, listen and get this feedback. And the feedback is not meant to be used for punitive measures, but to help, because at the end of the day, it is the learner that is at the center of it all. It's important. So one cannot legislate, that's what I'm saying, but taking so many things into, into coming into play determines how often, how frequent. But I have said it can't be once in a while. It cannot be once in a while. And there should also be a balance so there's no overload. Some people insist that every week there has to be some sort of I'm looking for a job, like Mr. Amos mentioned, I'm looking for a job. And then I'm managing, and then they just get into a school and someone just takes them. And I think that's why they get paid peanuts, because they just see one desperate person just needs to have somewhere to, until they get a better job, whatever that better job means. So having the traditional solid foundation of a teacher training, it's there are so many arguments. So they don't teach much. Nigerian colleges of education or faculties of education are not adequate. I do not agree with that. So they're important. You need that foundation, and I'm glad that there are courses. Some sort of, I've forgotten what they call these courses, like somebody wants to do a PGD, some conversion courses, so that whoever is getting into education has a foundation of the philosophy behind teaching, and get to understand all that. In addition to that, the other things that, those certifications and traditional courses don't cover are some of the things I have mentioned, and I will mention them again, like the social and emotional learning. We need to teach that. We need to go for courses for that. We need to, equip teachers in schools to know what it is about. In the past, if a child is, moody or not feeling good, or we just shout at the child and say, you better just face what you're supposed to be doing. I'm talking about like 20 years ago or like 50 years ago when I went to primary school. And the child just sits up. There's nobody to tell. And only God knows all the things that we had to bottle even in those days. So teachers need to learn to understand the backgrounds of, the different backgrounds that the learners come from, the cultural expectations, how to be responsive to it, the mental health, the well-being. These are very important things that need to be learned that we may not get from the traditional, courses that we do. How do you support students in their mental health issues? How do you even identify that this child in my class, that child, has needs, who do we refer to, and so on. And then Mr. Woso has talked extensively about technology, and it's evolving every day. What we learned many years ago, different from what we have now. So continuously, to be relevant in the classroom, today's teacher needs to be trained over and over, not just, I've been teaching, I have done my teacher training courses and so on. We need to be trained over and over in, how to remain relevant and be able to use technology effectively, not just for the sake of using technology, but for it to be as effective as it is expected to be. Other things that we also teachers need to learn is community engagement, parental engagement. Now, parenting 5 years ago, 10 years ago is different from parenting of today. So we need to learn. I mean, when I started teaching 30 years ago, it's not the same. The parents, well, incidentally, the children I taught then are now the parents of today. They're different, totally different. There's, you know, the way they raise the children, what they take as their responsibilities. For one thing, some of them are more hands-on. They are more engaged in what goes on in the class. They are more in tune with even things like, my child brought lunch to school. What did he eat? Did he finish it? You know, parents of yesteryears may not worry so much. You didn't eat your food. Make sure you eat your food, and that ends it. Parents of today would want to know, why didn't the teacher notice? So how do you relate to the parents? So parental engagement is very, very necessary. Community engagement. So those are part of the things that you may not get from the traditional teacher training, but we need to keep equipping teachers to learn. And things like teacher well-being, the burnouts that teachers feel. I had mentioned that the training sessions, the professional development things should not be so much that they don't have a breather. That goes against the teacher well-being. The midterm is 1 week or 2 days, as you know, depending on the state or wherever that it is. And then you put all the training within that period. There's no breather for the teacher. As important as those trainings are, it also means that the teachers are not going to be able to rest. And teachers do need this rest. And I hear some people say that teachers have too many holidays. Teachers are the ones that have to deal with human beings directly, not papers. They're not pushing papers around. And if you're pushing papers around, you can decide, I'll wake up in the night and deal with some issues. But you're teaching children. So you can't walk into a class of 25 or 20 children by 8 o'clock in the morning and say to them, I'm tired. Today I can't do anything. You have them from 8 o'clock or 7:30 to about 2 o'clock or there, and you have to function. So teachers do need to have some time of rest. So these are some of the areas that I think, there are many things, but we can't mention all of them, but these are very important areas, conflict resolution and so on. Now, the other things you have asked, how effective are the teacher approaches in public and private schools? Are there any disparities? I mean, if we start talking about this, we are going to be here till, to the end of the year. There are disparities. There are disparities. There are disparities. There are disparities. And some of these disparities are not, they are not all negative. In private schools, for instance, like I said, people can walk in, the teacher, you don't have any training, you don't even have any passion, you just want a place to be, and they're employed. There are different categories of, private schools. But that isn't going to happen in a public school at all. You have to be a teacher to go and apply to TESCOM, for instance, to be able to teach. So the disparities are not always negative. So you wouldn't find people who do not have the qualifications, certifications, working in the public sector. But then there are other things, the resources, the number of students, the number of learners in a class, fewer in some private schools than others, than what you have in the public schools. And of course, you have the unfunded areas, unreached areas, and all that. So, but what can we do about these things? Professional development is one of the ways that these disparities can be, something can be done about them. whether a teacher is teaching in a public school or teaching in a private school, is teaching a child who needs to learn, irrespective of the circumstances. So the teacher is the central figure there, because you can have all the resources of all the fantastic buildings. The fantastic buildings don't do the teaching. The teachers do the teaching. So professional development is key. It is one of the veritable ways that we can do something about these disparities. Governments can partner with, private organizations who provide quality teacher training programs so that public schools, private schools can attend and, subsidize it in such a way that it's easier for more people to attend. Like Mrs. Lawansin and Mr. Wonsu mentioned, early childhood education training, especially for Montessori, is pretty expensive. Private individuals can subsidize it. The government can subsidize it, so that people get trained, because the central and most important figure in the education field is the child. And so everything should, stem from that. What is in the best interest of the child? And other things, incentives for quality teachers, I would not go through that again because that has been mentioned, so people can be encouraged. I'm so pleased that there are so many teacher incentives and rewards and teacher awards going on these days. It's almost like around this period in October, every day, every other day, I see one other one. It's no longer just the Maltina one. There are so many others. And it is a very good area that, corporate organizations can weigh in. And that is quite motivating. And that helps in taking care of these disparities and act as incentives. And another, just going towards the last question, so that I would answer questions if there are any. What measures should schools take in implementing child protection and safety policies? Again, remember that I said in our traditional teacher training education, there are some things we just do the foundation, but then there are other things that we need to learn, other things that we need to, keep being abreast of. And Lagos State is doing a fantastic job in this child protection and safety policy. It is non-negotiable that every school should have a clear policy statement about child protection and safety. The Office of Education Quality Assurance in Lagos State, on their website, you will find a lot of information about that and so on. Not every state has it. Not on protecting the child. And when we have these policies, it helps us even in the buildings, the facilities, the things that the schools are providing in order to safeguard the children. So it should outline the commitment of the school in ensuring the safety and well-being of all the children that come in there. And there are many details to it. And another thing is, how many schools truly do background checks on the people who come into the school, on the people who work with the children? We keep hearing all the things that, the common one that we hear is when it has to do with a child has been sexually molested. But child safety and protection goes beyond that. It is a bad one when it happens, but there are other aspects of child safety. So background checks, there are organizations that do background checks. Try to find out who is this person Who is this person who wants to be around children? Are children safe around this person? Are children physically safe around this person? Are children emotionally safe around this person? So background checks, it's not very common now, but we have started. And I'm glad that schools have started. And it is important that more schools, take it very seriously and start and, not just employ people, but also commit some funds to doing some background checks on that. And the learners, the children, the school community should also be trained on what constitutes danger. Because it's one thing to have a policy. It's another thing for everybody within the school community to understand what it means. Which places are the children not allowed to go to? Where can they not be found? What should not happen? And so on and so forth. Everybody should know. A 3-year-old can talk. A 12-year-old can understand. There are some places I shouldn't be. There are things that I should not accept. There are things that I need to report about, and who should I report to? And that brings me to talking about the fact that every school should have a child protection, lead. That lead person, it shouldn't actually, the head of school, the principal is the overall head of all that, but there should be a child safety and protection lead within each school that the school community knows. If anything happens, if I have a complaint, if I have some concerns, if I have some suspicion, if I witness something that isn't, good for any child, who do I talk to immediately? So there should be that. So that has to come with a training of the school community, and school community, that includes the parents. It includes parents. It includes contractors. It includes vendors. It includes anybody and everybody that has anything to do with the school. So, and they need to know, more especially, who is the designated safeguarding lead. They need to know who that person is. And in addition to knowing, everybody needs to know the reporting procedures. It's not, I first talk to my friend, who now talks to another person, who now talks to another person. I mean, of course, you know how reported speech goes. Before it gets to the third person, it becomes a different story. And then it just becomes gossip. So if anything happens, who do I talk to immediately? What is the reporting procedure? And then what are the prevention programs? When you get to schools and you see how people, children, everybody is mingling and, finding learners, children, boys, girls in places where they should not be, you wonder, are there, what is the safeguarding protocol in this place? Or people talking, adults within the community talking to the younger ones, the children, in very offensive ways. So it's something that is very deep. And the truth is that state governments have agencies that are in charge of all these things. So again, a lot of education, a lot of awareness, and so on, including things like online safety. I mean, in today's world, even children in primary school have access to devices. And so there is, online bullying, cyberbullying, and so on. And that's contrary to safety and safeguarding. So what do they do? How are they trained? How are they, told what to do and how to safeguard themselves? And then if something does happen, what kind of first aid, what kind of medical attention should be given to a child who has been, maybe molested, for instance? And it's unfortunate that if you listen to the, personnel from agencies in charge of this, they'll tell you one of the first things not to do, and that is why a safeguarding lead is important, is that if a child has been molested, for instance, he needs to tell that story just once to the safeguarding lead. It's not everybody comes and says, hey, tell me what happened. And then he starts again. And then another person comes, hey, tell me what happened. That story should be told because that is trauma in itself. It should be told once to a safeguarding lead who will now take it. Who can now, if you need to report to someone else, will report. But you can't put a child and say, hey, tell me what happened. How did? No, that is trauma, upon trauma and upon trauma. So again, education is part of, people need to be educated on what to do, what kind of support, and so on. And these policies need to be, reviewed, reinforced, disseminated, accessible, and all that. So there are many things about this. So in conclusion about this, in how schools need to implement the child protection and safety policy, it is holistic. They should first accept that it is as important as providing the teaching and learning in the school. It is very important, and they need to give adequate attention to it. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Chinedu. You said so much. I mean, touching on the key variables to check, in terms of training frequency and the fact that it needs to be continuous, the importance of needs assessment, especially with support of school management, because this is what actually gives a wholesome view on what teachers actually need so that they can continue to grow and to improve. I particularly found it interesting, the point about the importance of traditional courses, and giving that foundational philosophy of how to be a teacher in the first place, and having that certification is also very important. And also that, as part of it being a disparity between public and private schools, this is also something that professional development and trainings can cover. And I also think it's very important for schools to have policies that are as clear as crystal, in the way they handle children, how to identify danger and prevent it, and also how to onboard teachers. I don't think we do a lot of background check, as you said. So I think that is actually very important, especially for teachers that will be handling, little children who are just in early care. So thank you very, very much for that. I'd like to hand over to Mrs. Lawanson. I hope she's still with us. I know that she has limited time with us. And if you'd like to share any other contributions in like 1 or 2 minutes, and then we will move on to question and answer. Mrs. Lawanson. Okay, I think she'll come back, but there's one interesting question. I think this is for Mr. Wosu, and the question is that, should there be a centralized curriculum for early childhood care and development in mother tongues, and what should it entail in a multilingual society like ours?
Okay, thank you, Bob. Actually, that question is even a question that even people who are at the top at NERDC, they even find it very difficult to answer. That's because Nigeria has we are really multilingual. We have many languages, and in some states, for instance, Cross River. I was privileged to do a project in Cross River State, and I came to find out that they have over 900 dialects, 900. So which language will the state adopt, and which one will they reject? You know how proud we are of our languages. So that may put some kind of difficulty. But from the national policy on education, the national policy on education advocates that children in their early learning ages, let's say from primary 1 to 3, they should learn, if possible, in their indigenous language. Okay, but even at that, we still have some issues around it. We have some issues around it. For some states who have been, some languages are kind of developed, like Yoruba, Hausa, maybe Igbo as well, and Efik, or some of them, where maybe some of the contents can be taught in the classroom. But some languages have not been developed to that form where resources can be used in teaching, so it becomes a problem on its own. Aside that, indigenous language now is even changing. In some places, the first language or the mother tongue of the child is even English. So it becomes an issue. A child born in the Highbrow area of Lagos State may not accept the parents are particular about it, but the child's first language is now maybe English language, or English is just the language. So it becomes an issue talking about our indigenous language entirely. But by and large, I think that question will be best answered by our policymakers. For me, I've just given you insights, what I have. Maybe, Doctor, if you want to add, maybe you can. Thank you. That's my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Mr. Osu. Dr. Chinedum, I don't know if you have thoughts on that question.
Well, incidentally, last night I listened to, there's this man that is a polyglot. He's in the entertainment industry. And so he speaks a lot of languages, about 8 or more. And he does these interviews of Nigerians who can speak the languages from other places. So last night I watched him, just a little clip on LinkedIn, and he interviewed someone from the north, core north. Incidentally, this young man was born in Ekiti, grew up in Ekiti. So he speaks fluent Hausa, fluent Yoruba, fluent Ekiti dialect, and speaks English. And in the interview, he was asked that how come he can speak Ekiti. He says, I was born in Ekiti land. Everybody speaks that dialect. But I learned to speak, regular Yoruba in school. And then when he comes into home, his parents speak Hausa. So as a young child, he was exposed to 4 languages. And he can speak the 4. Speak English, of course, in his school, they're speaking English, and people around speaking. Pidgin is a language, so he was exposed to 5. So he speaks Pidgin, he speaks English, he speaks Yoruba, which he learned in school. He speaks Ekiti, which is what people within the neighborhood speak. And he speaks Hausa, which is a language that his parents speak. I think we have another question he was asked before I just make a sentence and a statement and then. Another question he was asked was, were your parents angry with you when they heard you speaking I hope I'm not off.
No, you're still here.
All right. Yes. Were your parents angry when they heard you speaking Yoruba? And he said no. He said when his friends in the neighborhood come into the house, they're all speaking Ekiti. Everybody is talking. But when his parents are talking to him, they're talking to him in Hausa. And I thought that was fantastic. I mean, I don't know this guy, but I do know someone, a colleague of mine, who grew up in Mushi, and he's Igbo. He speaks Igbo fluently. He had never lived in Igbo land, but he speaks Igbo fluently. And of course, he speaks Yoruba fluently, because Yoruba is a language of where he. Now, people grow up, the only people who grew up in Yoruba land, who grew up in Lagos and they can speak Yoruba, is low income. And so a child is born in Lagos, grew up in Lagos, and he cannot speak Yoruba. So we really do not need the government to make any legislations about this for it to work. It should come from homes. You just speak the language that is not, and the sad thing is, you find people are speaking Yoruba, and then they want to talk to their child. I'm using Yoruba as an example, being in Yoruba land. Not that it doesn't happen. I also see it among Igbos, you know. I see it among Igbos as well. And then they want to talk to their child, a little child, and they are speaking English. And the sad thing is that English is not correct. I mean, I can do busybody. I'll say to the person sometimes, speak your language or speak pidgin, so that we're sure of what that child is learning. The child is either learning your own language or learning pidgin, which is a language in itself. But you're trying to speak, in quotes, good English, and you're mixing up everything. So your child, and when you say, he understands, so he just cannot speak. So I think there should be some sort of advocacy where people are told, just speak your language to your child. And you find that when they get to school, the language of the area should be part of what happens within the school. What Mr. Amosu is saying about Cross River, it's not just in Cross River. Lagos State has another language other than Yoruba. So if you grew up in Badagry area, you should be able to speak Egun. It is the language of the area. If you grew up where the Ilajes are, in Ijaniki, you should be able to speak Ilaje. But when we all throw it away and we're expecting government to make a legislation about it, then there is a problem. Those are my thoughts.
Your thoughts are most appreciated. So what you're saying is, rather than waiting for government to make it a policy or something that must be enforced, it's also good that we start from the community itself, which is, I think it's also very important. So thank you all so much. I want to say, I think we have definitely overshot our time by more than Wotunrayo is back to give me the warning. So thank you all so much it's been such a rich discussion. I'm grateful to our panelists for hanging with us for this long. It's really been a learning conversation, and I know that this one would have a lasting impression and also spark a call to action for us all to keep improving pedagogy, improving the way we interact with children, especially those in the early childhood education. So at this point, I would like to hand over to our delightful host, Ms. Wotunrayo Fatoke, to close us out. Thank you so much, Dr. Chinedu, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Lawrenson, and Mr. Wosu. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much for joining. That was a very, very robust and insightful panel discussion. I just really want to take out this time to, thank all our panelists, for Zima also for being so brilliant with the engagement. And so you can learn more about our work and other upcoming events if you follow us on LinkedIn at TEP Center, and then on Twitter at TEP Center as well, and then Instagram at TEP Center. I'm sure Mofi will be putting all of these links in the chat box, so please try to look out for it. And so we've come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much. Bye for now. See you next month in our next webinar edition.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ozioma. Thank you, Wotunrayo. Thank you, Mofi. Thank you very much. God bless you all.